So hello to everybody who's joining us on the line. We're going to give it a few moments before we actually get started with the content, just to let everybody kind of filter in to this session. But while we're waiting for more people to join us, if everyone could use the chat function to let us know where they're dialing in from, that would be great. It's always interesting for us to see where participants are joining us from, and if we have any international visitors as well. But we've got Sydney, Singapore. Welcome to our international visitors. More Sydney. Yeah, there's a lot of the usual suspects here, Felipe. There's a lot of Sydney, a lot of Melbourne.
Fantastic. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, one from Brunei. Hello and welcome.
Wow, fantastic.
Malaysia, Perth, Melbourne, Adelaide, Philippines. Wow, we've got a real diverse audience with us today. Brilliant.
Yeah, this is great. Wow.
Fantastic. Well, hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. My name is Holly Baldwin. I'm from Informa Corporate Learning and I'm delighted to be joined today by Felipe Rego. We're going to talk to you about how to build and manage a successful data visualization and storytelling within your organization. So Felipe is a leading advanced analytics and data science partner. He works with many organizations to help them build, enhance and manage their data visualization capabilities. After many years in the corporate world, he now has his own research and consultancy company, and he works with many clients across the world to help them with their data. He's recently been awarded a postgraduate research degree from the University of Sydney, and has also been invited to work with government agencies as an advisor, which is fantastic. On top of all of this, he blogs, he writes, he delivers webinars, and we here at Informa have been lucky enough to work with Felipe over a number of years now, and he delivers training courses to our clients far and wide on data visualization, but also on best practice and tools in practice on things like Power BI and Tableau, and which I know our clients get a lot of practical tips and tools out of, which is great. So if you do want to learn more about Felipe, he's got a website which is feliperego.com.au. So before we go any further, this will probably last for about 30 to 45 minutes. You should see at the bottom, you've got the chat obviously, but you've also got a Q&A tab. Please, please, please do ask as many questions as you want in that tab. And at the end, we'll get to the Q&A session where we can answer as many of those as possible. So please do keep them flowing in. Whenever you think of them, just type them in there and we'll get to them at the end of the session. So welcome, Felipe.
Holly, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for everyone to be joining us and for this lovely introduction, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome. You definitely deserve a good introduction. I guess to start things off, Felipe, I really want to start with the real fundamentals of why should people even be looking at their data visualization capabilities?
It's a great question, Holly, to start really, because it makes sense with the first really slide that I put out there for us. So for everyone on the line joining us, welcome. And this is kind of the starting point that I want us to start discussing, which is why should we do data visualization and storytelling? And Holly's question was, why should we do it? But here's why should we do well as well? And I'll share with you a bunch of different ideas and mostly strategic, because a lot of the discussion out there about data visualization and storytelling is very much about tactical elements, or it's about tools. We can definitely discuss about that, and we will. But I want to start on a more strategic level. So why should we do data visualization and storytelling well? Start thinking about that. And you probably know the answer to that. We have data. Data is everywhere. But one of the key reasons that we want to be able to do data visualization and storytelling well is about optimizing and leveraging that asset. It's now an asset. It's not something that is at the back end, something that nobody pays attention. It's something that exists and we can leverage that. So I wanted to start thinking about data as more as an asset and what can we do to augment and make it optimize within the organization. So as I mentioned, data is everywhere. So we've been consuming and producing data everywhere. And it is believed, according to research, that by 2025, we will have 175 zettabytes worth of data being produced. And just to give that into perspective, I was doing some calculation the other day. I want to give you some perspective. What is 175 zettabytes? It's a lot of data, but it's the equivalent of more than 1 billion ultra high definition pictures being taken every second. So I'm actually giving you that silence, so you start thinking about, wow, that's a lot of data being produced. So everywhere we go, we have friends online, we talk to family, and everywhere in the world, all those different channels produce data. In fact, if you think about every time you send an email, every time you make a purchase online, every time you take a picture, every time you do this kind of video calls that we're doing, make a phone call, anything that we touch these days produce data. So Holly, these are some of the initial ideas that I want to give to people to start thinking about in terms of data visualization and storytelling.
Yeah, I think it's great to always start with the real fundamentals, Felipe. And I think now more than ever, organizations really need to start looking to the future. So can you give any thoughts on, how organizations can kind of future-proof their data visualization capability?
Sure. So the way I like to think about that, Holly, is as this sort of command center. And it's really important to have the strategy, but also to have the ideas behind how to execute on those. And I very often recommend organizations to start thinking about a more holistic approach to data visualization and storytelling. That will be a really key differentiation down the track, because nowadays we are learning how to manage and tame those big data sets. I think the differentiation will be, how can we walk leaders, communities, and people in general in a journey around what that data can do to us. So that's a different mindset that I want to portray. But it's really also about moving beyond a simple application or looking at only a particular tool. This is just a classic example. We use a lot of Excel or spreadsheets in general to not only manage data, but also to create data visualization. And it's still indeed a very powerful and a very capable tool for that kind of idea. And indeed, in the course that we run, we walk people through a bunch of cool tips and tricks about what to do in terms of improving your, even if it's within an Excel environment, your data visualization capabilities. But it's, as I said, it's a little bit more than that. I would urge you all to start thinking about building a capability in the context of layers. Basically, you need to have a data and a technology infrastructure with some governance in place in order for you to then enable some sort of analytics so you can unleash the power of data. But then the third and next step there would be to apply visualization aspects within that data so you can augment knowledge and augment how people can perceive data and what they can do about it. So it's a more holistic approach. And at the end, hopefully we see, this is a classic diagram for the guys in data in the call. Those who are very comfortable with a data environment will see and will be comfortable with that. But it's really an important capabilities to build that central repository where all the source systems that you have in your business, they bring in data, and then at the end you have where the business impact really happens. It's not only about consuming data, but it's also about creating reports, about building predictive models, and exploring the data that you have. So what I like to think about, Holly, here is this idea of thinking about like a cake. You have to have a fundamental, you have to have that foundational infrastructure and technology and people and processes. And then you add on top of that an advanced analytical capability built by skills and a good mix of teams. And then on top of that, you've got that data visualization and storytelling capability. So Holly, hopefully this analogy is kind of more or less interesting, at least for us here in Sydney. It makes us feel a bit hungry because it's lunchtime. So hopefully that is something that resonates.
Definitely. I love that analogy of, kind of building and making sure you get those strong foundations in place. That's really going to make sure that, the future is solid and stable within an organization. And moving on to, while we're still looking at that future aspects, why do you think organizations are having to look at more of a compelling and action-orientated data viz?
Holly, I think the world now is changing, and we keep hearing and reading about think about it, every time you open the page of a newspaper or a magazine, everywhere that people talk about the artificial intelligence and machine learning. So there's a lot of efforts around making sure that all those things are interpretable, things that we know what's going on in that crazy black box that we put data in, and then something comes out. So I think behind the scenes, data is pushing some of those really exciting developments, and the beauty of that is that a lot of positive things will come out of that. We've got a lot of data available. We've got compute power that is relatively cheap, and you've got very interesting algorithms. So the combination of those three are essentially disrupting the world, and that disruption will bring a lot of positive things like improving productivity. We may see improvement in quality of lives, but we also may see. Think about how many cyber attacks are happening these days. Think about the concern around biases and us bringing whatever bias we have into the model, into the data, and then things will be carried over. So privacy things and so forth. So there are pros and cons within that. And data visualization could be one ally that we can utilize to make sure that we see what's happening. So it's really about thinking about those disruptive forces, but thinking about like Spider-Man, right? Uncle Ben is basically saying, with great power comes great responsibility. So I want us to start thinking a little bit about that in that sense. So much so that if you're a leader in an organization, or if you work closely with a leader, you will see that they still struggle to make sense of how can they unleash the power of their data. A research here in Australia done a few years back found very similar results as we are alluding to. The executive level of understanding of analytics. And I think it could be a maturity problem, but not necessarily an individual maturity problem, more from an organization perspective. So again, having that foundational layer coupled with an advanced analytic capability, powered by and augmented by a visualization layer, really changes things. So in my walks of life and through my consulting work, I've put together, I guess, essentially 5 pillars that is really important for organizations and teams and leaders to think about what to consider. So Holly, these are essentially what I wanted to kind of discuss a little bit further.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions flying as well there, Felipe. So you obviously touched a nerve with some people, which is great. So please do keep the questions coming on the Q&A tab. We had a couple fly in there, which is fantastic. But Felipe, I know that you're an absolute fantastic wealth of knowledge, and especially through your consulting work. So can you walk us through a bit more about some of the findings from that?
Sure, Holly. Yeah, it's essentially, I think it's I'm going to go deeper into those pillars because I feel like, and I feel that this can help everyone on the line. It's, again, strategic, but you can affect, particularly on the last 2 pillars there, the ability to ask questions and building and managing action-oriented storytelling can be very powerful for you as an individual. But let's go into it. We gauge a little bit about organization and culture. So the first layer that I would like you to start considering is, what is my organization? What is the culture within that? We've run some surveys around this just to kind of gauge a variety of different topics within the theme of organization and culture. And we found what? We found that when organizations apply strategy into data analytics, data science, and data visualization, and vice versa, when those things inform strategy, they tend to be more competitive. They become faster to react in the market. Other things that we found is that organizations and leaders that pay attention and frequently communicate the value that you guys are doing and delivering, they tend to attract and retain better talent. They tend to find better return on that investment. So those are ideas within organization and culture. So having the right organization and culture is essential to unleash and build data visualization and storytelling capability. Other things that we talk about in that survey and in the walks of life that we have here is data and technology. It's about having governance. It's about having the right tools, the right approach to solving solutions. And here what we found is that a lot of organizations still have a hard time tackling data silos, but those had to solve, or at least attempt to solve for those things. They end up having lower risks. They increase transparency. Also, what we see is organizations, when they have when they apply new technologies, but also novel techniques to solving problems. And novel techniques, not like, oh, wow, super crazy thing that nobody uses. No, it's just trying different things. They tend to be a little bit more innovative. They see more competitive behavior. And also the last point here is about leaders moving beyond just talking about data quality and actually pursuing processes to solve for that. So the third element, so remember the first three, organization and culture, data and technology, talent and teams. Talent and teams has to do with teams and individuals in an organization. And we still see a lot of the mix of talent being poorly organized and a little bit of that old school delivery model. So what we found was also for you to build a successful data visualization and storytelling capability, it's important for you to mix talent in your team, bring people that have that strategic knowledge, have domain knowledge, but also have the technical skills to build really cool things. And also we see organizations developing more agile methods of delivery. Instead of thinking about and then planning and then trying to execute, they try something small and then they deliver and they ship it really fast and see what they can learn from it. The last point in talent and teams is what we are seeing is a stronger appetite and desire to improve the skills of team members. So we are seeing that the impact of upskilling is driving an increased, more modernized approach to solving for data. The last two pillars, and then we'll move on. But the last two, I think, has a strong impact on you as an individual, and that is the ability to ask questions. Reflect a little bit on your own ability to how well do you ask questions when it comes to solve a particular data problem. When you sit down in front of your client or in front of your boss, how well do you pose specific, measurable, time-bound questions? So these are some of the skills that we're gauging as well. And during the training programs that we offer, we cover a lot of techniques to improve on that. But we found that individuals that ask more specific, measurable, and time-based questions tend to have a better clarity on what they need to do. The whole team performs a little bit better. We also see leaders in organizations that move beyond just asking questions, but actually incentivizing people to ask what are the questions we should ask. They tend to attract better talent and improve the whole results that they achieve. So think about the ability to ask questions that you currently have and how you can potentially improve that. The last one is about building and delivering not only beautiful, and again, beauty is very important in data visualization, but it's not only it's not only beautiful visualization, but also interpretable and action-oriented. Many of us have a lack of time, right? So we need to start thinking a little bit of, should I develop things that allow my end user to just simply take action and move on? Or do I have that leeway to build things that walk them in a journey? So these are some of the things that we've discovered in terms of action-oriented storytelling. That's one fundamental pillar in building a successful data visualization and storytelling capability. It's about uniting beauty with interpretability. It's about stating your assumptions, adding your caveats. We were running a training program just a few days ago, and we really worked together around adding that idea of putting assumptions in your work, stating clearly what was left out, what was included. And lastly, if you can, try to build your capability by giving access to everyone, pretty much everyone in the organization, access to data, productized somehow through the product of your data visualization work. We tend to see organizations improving the way that they, inquiry flourishes, and they tend to be a little bit more innovative as well. So those are essentially, Holly, my five, I guess, takes and ideas that I want to leave everyone to think about. Very strategic in that sense.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that really kind of broad insight. I think for me, the part about asking the right questions and having the ability to do that really resonated. And I know with the training that you deliver as well, you also like to make sure that people come away with, real kind of tips and tricks they can use. So I guess I wanted to ask you next about what other kind of practical ideas could you give people on the line today about if they're starting out with trying to build a capability?
Sure, Holly. So far I talked a lot about sort of that more high level, and I really feel that that's really important because we tend to ignore that. But the next step is really, okay, what can I do? So here, I started from we can go from an organizational level down to the project or a team level, and then down to the individual. So what are those things that I can actually do? So from an organization, so if you own your business, or if you lead a large team or an organization, it's important to have that sponsorship. Either if you're a leader, you go on and you support your team to develop best-in-class type of solutions, or you go on and work around getting sponsorship from your high-level executive. Other things is about aligning to strategic priorities. How often, look back into your business now and think about how often the work that you do in terms of, you know, creating reports, creating dashboards, creating presentations, how much of that solves strategic priorities that you have defined within the organization. So try to align that. If you align that closely to that world, I feel like the results will come out a little bit better. And then unleash passion. That's the other thing within an organization that I tend to see, that once you have people working collaboratively and cross collaboration with different teams within that concept of solving for a data visualization project, you tend to see a lot better results. So those are some ideas within the organization. If you're developing something as part of a team, those three things in the middle there, they're very important. And I think you should start thinking more about that. How well do you pose and ask and answer questions? How well are you defining audience? And in the course we train, we share a lot of interesting ideas about particularly qualitative aspects of defining audience. And also the other thing is about, very often people think that visuals are the only thing in a data visualization, and it's not quite. And in that particular program, we spend a lot of time thinking about what else can we do in terms of the composition to make it more appealing and action oriented. Lastly, for you as an individual, what can you do? Obviously, get closer to that world by taking up a particular course. Read some books and blogs. There's a bunch of stuff out there. So, and lastly, it's really about doing, isn't it? It's about, you know, what else can I do? Open up that spreadsheet that you had, or that particular application that you're building, and have a second look and try different things in there. So these are some of the hopefully more practical ideas that I can give you in this really short amount of time that we have. And lastly is this idea of very often people ask us, what are some of the books that you recommend and things that exist out there that I could start reading? And these are really my suggestions. On the left side, you have more conceptual, yet highly practical. And on the right side, you have things that are specific to a software or a tool. So most of those things are open source as well. And so hopefully this helps as well. And Holly, I guess, you know, really to conclude that more or less short amount of time that we had to share these ideas, I want to give you guys this, it's from Walt Disney. And the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So again, I encourage you to just get your hands dirty, try different things. And obviously we're here to kind of help. So I just want to thank you for this really succinct experience that we had here. And Holly might want to kind of cover a few other things that we may want to discuss here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Felipe, for that insight. It's been brilliant to have that amount of time with you. For everyone on the line, please do stay with us. We will get to Q&A in just a moment. We just wanted to share with you some information we do have on upcoming data visualization and storytelling training. So we're also, as a thank you, going to offer 15% discount for anyone on the line today who's joined us. We have multiple dates coming up in October, November, and December. We will be sending an email to you all with a copy of the recording today and also this information. So don't worry too much about scribbling it all down. But maybe just take down our email, which is training@informa.com.au. Please do let us know of any questions, queries, or comments. We do also offer this course and courses on Power BI and Tableau, and we offer them in-house as well. So if you have a team who you think would benefit and also benefit from looking to customize the program, pop us an email on that email address and we will help you and talk you through how that works. So now I'd like to move over to our Q&A. We've had a couple come in, Felipe, which is great. So I'll kick us off. We've got one that says, what suggestions from a more tactical perspective can you suggest for people to pay attention to when building a data visualization capability?
Let me answer. Thanks, Holly. Thanks for the question. Whoever asked that, much appreciated. The practical ideas that I can give you, particularly around not so much the capability. Let me move away from that, and let's now start thinking maybe from an executional point of view. Let's say I need to deliver a report. What are the things that I can do to improve the way I do things now? So maybe one thing that they can do is start thinking. Remember, we discussed that. We just discussed that. But how well have you defined the questions that you're trying to solve? That's one initial point. The other one is, how well have you defined the audience there? And I would encourage you to move away from, it's my boss, or it's that team, or it's that community, or it's a group of people between 25 and 40 years old. No, use that, but then go further. Try to get some qualitative aspects about your audience. And those things will be really interesting nuggets that you can use in your data visualization. It can help you structure your narrative a little bit better. It can help you give some ideas on new visuals. And that's a great segue. I kind of gave myself a segue, which is the next part is visuals. Think a little bit about apply rigor and purpose on your own visualizations. So hopefully these are some of the ideas. I know we discussed about that. I don't know if I went further enough to answer, but hopefully that made you think differently.
Right, that's good additional insight there, Felipe. Thank you. We've also got a fantastic one here. This is always one that particularly interests me as well. So it'd be good to see what your response is here, Felipe.
Okay.
Which data tools exist out there that you see being used more often?
Sure. I mean, okay. Good way to start thinking about that is, in your mind, you could split it into more or less two families of tools. I don't know if I like that, but you could more or less think about commercial tools, things that you pay and it's highly supported and it has like a very good versioning and all of that. And then there's open source, community created and supported tools. And those are more or less different. And they have different capabilities and different, I guess different people use those different families of tools. But we see, for example, classic, very popular tools in the commercial side. We see Microsoft Power BI, we've got Tableau, we've got Click, and obviously Google with Google Data Studio, and Looker now that Google bought Looker. So we've got those, I guess those would be the top of mind, I guess, if you will. There's plenty others out there, by the way. On the open source side, you essentially have libraries that are within a particular programming language, like JavaScript. So we've got a very popular one called D3JS, D3, the letter D and the number 3, JS. And it's a very, very interesting tool. A lot of the data journalists tend to use and apply within many of the big publications use those tools. And then I've got a sprawling of different tools around that open source as well. So in R, we've got a bunch of interesting libraries like ggplot2. In Python, you've got Seaborn, Matplotlib. For those technical in the room, they probably go, oh yeah, I know that one. That's cool. For those of you who are a bit general, like, you know, you'll be like, oh, I don't know what that means. Don't worry. Google those things. They're really, really interesting. But I would start thinking about commercial open source. And then you need to start thinking about, sourcing those tools and how do you kind of then bring them into your team and how do you leverage the power of those tools. Holly, hopefully that was relevant.
Yeah, definitely. That was great. Keep your questions coming, guys. You can use either the Q&A tab or the chat function. I'll pick them up on either. So next question, Felipe, is how can people start learning more about data visualization? And then the second part is, and particularly about applying it to their day-to-day jobs.
Okay, I'm going to be biased here, guys. Obviously, my training program, but no, but in all seriousness, those last 3 points that we discussed, I might go back here if you don't mind, but remember those 3 points that we discussed about obviously getting some sort of formal, structured training. But there's a bunch of books and it's just a lot of blogs out there, from strategic to tactical to hands-on practical, depending on the tool that you use. And another suggestion I would give is just really, every time you now set up a new presentation, if you, if you're going to be building a presentation in PowerPoint, or if you're going to be building a dashboard in one of those tools, whatever medium you're going to be using, start thinking a little bit differently. Start thinking about the whole composition. And you're not an analyst only anymore, or a business person trying to convey a message. You are also an artist, and you need to look at that particular medium with a different perspective. You need to start thinking about the elements within that, and you need to start thinking about how that flows through from a beginning, middle, and an end perspective. So start thinking differently about that. Is the structure of my presentation, dashboard, good enough? Aligned to what? The questions aligned to the audience. So all those things are very important to consider. Hopefully that helps, Holly.
Yes, it definitely does. I've got another question here actually about how you visualize and tell the story. So it says, do you have any thoughts or insights into how best you can use color and text and actually make sure that storytelling is appearing well on the page?
Oh, that's interesting. Very good. Thanks for the question. Specific, which is great. So when it very generically, it will vary according to the whatever you're building, right? But in general, I would be very careful with the application of colors, and in doubt, I would remove and I would think twice. But very often, instead of looking at a very dispersed palette of colors, what we tend to see, things that resonate really well, are very small options. So you would have shades of a particular hue that you may choose. When it comes to text, we really encourage avoiding putting a lot of text in your own page. And you can use some interesting design elements to play with text. One that I will give you now is that idea of strategic contrast. Think a little bit about what can you do in terms of strategic contrast in your text. But it's essentially about leaving all the information that you care about there, but bringing to the fore things that people need to pay attention to, and they need to pay attention to quickly or more often. So those are some of the ideas when it comes to color and text, I guess I would tell people. Yes.
Yeah, that was a great question actually about the output and how it appears to the end user. So that's fantastic. The next question I have is, do you have any particular tips on how data visualization in healthcare can be presented under the context of introducing data story for a less well-versed community?
Look, what I would say in that regard, I would say in healthcare, in my very humble experience here, we have sometimes audiences that are really capable, and if you actually which is the normal suggestion, is to kind of bring it down to a more basic level. So if you do that to certain audiences, they were going to say, oh, that you're treating me like, I don't know what I'm talking about. So be careful in that regard. But the general approach would be, if in doubt, if you're using too many jargons, if you're using too many acronyms, I would encourage you to bring it down to the level of normal people that know how to understand. If you need to dial it up a little bit, go for it, depending on the audience. But defining the audience and then dial the execution down to a more basic level. And when it comes to building the story, I feel like it would be very similar to what we recommend in other sectors, other domains, which is about understanding the beginning, the middle, and the end, and where within that narrative arc, where you can add some interesting things. And in the program, we walk through people in a variety of different ways that they can approach that narrative in order to resonate with the audience. But really, it's about, I would recommend you to kind of bring it down to a level where it's understandable, it's accessible by anyone from any background. And from there on, you may be able to build it up. I don't know if that answers, but if not, please ask again, Holly.
Yeah, it was a brilliant question there, whoever asked that one. Again, really focusing on the end user, which is something that I feel needs to be sort of front of mind the whole way through. So that was a brilliant question, whoever asked that one. We don't currently this time have any more questions. Felipe, maybe we'll give it a minute or so just in case anybody else does want to ask anything. Please do use that Q&A or that chat function. And just a reminder, we will be sending over a recording of this. So you will get a copy of this along with some more information from us. So yeah, I don't think we necessarily have any more questions. Oh, we do actually, I tell a lie. So one's just popped in saying, in healthcare, patient-reported clinical outcomes is more established than patient-reported experience outcomes. How do we introduce the customer satisfaction story through data visualization? It's a very specific one there for you, Felipe.
Yes, yes. Wow. I would love to kind of get deeper into that because, but essentially, you know, I feel like you can add new specifics within that story by making that logical connection. So what we tend to work during the course is really about, first of all, again, define the questions and the theme really well. And then you derive from there a little bit about the narrative. How can you structure that? So things that we do is about storyboarding. We do a little bit of the ability to structure a narrative with logical connections between the beginning, the middle, and the end, and everything within those, I guess, breaks. So if you actually add one of those, the customer satisfaction, I think, right, Holly, that they mentioned there.
Yeah.
Depending on how that is represented, then you can try to find links from the prior canvas, if you will, that you kind of illustrated something, and then you can find a hook that you can then add to that. But definitely, if they are very different, another consideration is if they are very different from each other. I mean, if you have things that are communicated and structured in a way that is kind of very different from another one that you want to add. Maybe do you really need to add? Maybe try to keep it separate and build themes that are different from each other. And then you end up having maybe two products, right? Instead of one consolidated, but it may be better for the end user so they can understand that they're separate things. So again, I'm not sure if I went specific there, but hopefully that helped you think in a few different ideas.
Yeah, it was good to get an industry specific question in there as well, which is great.
Yeah.
Not so much of a question, but many thanks, Holly and Felipe. Very insightful session. So thank you for having made that comment. It's much appreciated. We don't have any more questions at this time, but again, we're more than happy to stay on the line for a minute or so if any more do come in. We do have a little bit more time available to us. I know, Felipe, you've gone through an awful lot of information in a very short space of time. So I think we've covered quite a lot already. But again, if there is anything further that anyone wants to add, please do let us know.
Indeed, Holly, a lot of the content that we prepare I find that a lot of the discussion out there, and for everyone on the line, is very much about like, oh, what sort of visualization do I do? What sort of, very much important. But there's a lot of that out there. And not only that, but it's only kind of touching the surface. So very much important to consider a whole infrastructure and culture as well. Culture is very important as well. So those are some of the key ideas that we discussed, right, Holly?
Definitely. Well, we haven't had any more questions pop up, so I think we'll probably wrap this up now. Thank you so much to everyone on the line. It's been fantastic having you guys join us. And please do keep a lookout from us for further communications about training and webinars as well. I'm sure we'll put on another one of these sessions in the future and look at some different topics as well for you guys. And obviously our biggest thank of the day goes to Felipe. Thank you so much for your time and insight. It's been really beneficial by the sounds of it for a lot of people. So it's been fantastic to deliver this with you today.
Thanks for having me, Holly, and thanks everyone for joining us. So I look forward to seeing you all at some point.
Lovely. Thank you very much and take care.
Thanks, Holly.